He stood trembling at the chalkboard. 14, black and brilliant, solving a calculus problem meant for college seniors. The class watched in stunned silence, but the teacher didn't clap. He erased the board without a word, then gave him a B. His mistake? Showing too many steps. But what no one knew was that someone had filmed everything. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. August in Hanover County, Virginia, meant two things: humidity thick as syrup and the buzz of fresh notebooks meeting old desks. Cameron Riley, just 14 and a year ahead of his peers, zipped up his oversized backpack and stepped off the bus into Jefferson High School's towering front doors. He paused briefly in the hallway, eyes tracing the unfamiliar faces, lockers, and faculty, before tightening the straps on his backpack and moving forward. Cameron wasn't just a freshman, he was the freshman. Advanced placement in nearly every subject, placed 2 grades ahead in math since middle school. But even with his perfect test scores, nothing about today felt secure. It wasn't the subject matter that made him nervous, it was the room. Room 24-1. Honors Calculus. The hall grew quieter as he approached it. Not literally, but in a way that made every footstep louder in his own ears. He pushed open the door and stepped into the class. The moment was subtle, but unmistakable. A pause in conversation, eyes shifting, air tightening. The students in the room were mostly juniors and seniors, white, well-dressed, confident. One girl tilted her head and whispered something to the boy next to her. He smirked. Cameron walked to an open seat in the second row and set his backpack down. From the chalkboard, Mr. Anders turned. "You looking for Mr. Feldman's Algebra 2 class? That's down the hall." Cameron stood upright. "No, sir. I'm here for honors calculus." Mr. Anders tilted his head slightly. Mid-50s, salt and pepper hair, pressed shirt. His look wasn't angry. It was amused. A flicker of disbelief.
Name:
Cameron Riley. The teacher looked down at his roster, squinting. The class sat in tense stillness. "You're a freshman," Mr. Anders said aloud. "Yes, sir. I tested into this course. I got a placement letter from the math department." A beat. Mr. Anders walked slowly to the board, picked up a stick of chalk and began writing. A long, complex derivative equation began to unfold in loops of white on green. He stepped aside, revealing a problem most students wouldn't encounter until their final quarter. Cameron's stomach turned. He hadn't seen this particular form before. "If you're really supposed to be here, solve this." The room rippled with restrained gasps. Some students exchanged glances. Others leaned back smugly, arms folded. Cameron stared at the board. He knew this wasn't a teaching moment. It was a test, one designed to humiliate. He stepped forward, slowly. Every inch of the classroom watched him like a hawk tracking movement. One student whispered, "This should be good." Cameron picked up the chalk. His hand was trembling, but not from fear. It was adrenaline. He ran through formulas in his head. Chain rule, product rule. What assumptions could he make? Mr. Anders folded his arms. Cameron exhaled. He started with a substitution method, risky but elegant if correct. He paused midway, erased a step, then recalculated. Whispering behind him grew. "What's he even doing? That's not how we learned it." He blocked it out. He could feel heat crawling up his neck, but he didn't flinch. Line by line, he built the solution. 10 minutes passed. When he finally stepped back, chalk dust on his fingers. Cameron turned. Mr. Anders didn't say a word. He walked slowly to the board, looked at the final answer, then traced the steps in reverse. His eyes narrowed, not at the correctness, but at the method. He looked at Cameron and said nothing. Just erased the board. "Take your seat." No nod. No recognition. Cameron walked back to his desk, hearing the hum of disbelief behind him. Not admiration, not respect, confusion, suspicion. Mr. Anders resumed the lecture, as if nothing had happened. After class, the whispers were louder. He probably studied it in advance. Bet his mom got him a private tutor. He didn't even do it the right way. The words stung more because they weren't yelled. They were whispered, hidden in corners, passed like notes. The kind of racism that wore a polite smile. At lunch, Cameron sat alone. He opened his textbook and tried to study, but his hands wouldn't stop shaking. This wasn't about math. It wasn't about ability. It was about permission, about who was allowed to take up space. Across the cafeteria, A group of students laughed as they mimicked calculus terms. One boy, a football player, said loud enough for Cameron to hear, "Yo, maybe he should be teaching the class instead." Mr. Riley with the X-squared drip. Laughter. Cameron stared at his tray. He hadn't touched his food. When he got home that evening, his mother was in scrubs, exhausted from a double shift. She smiled when she saw him. "First day down, baby. How was it?" Cameron hesitated. He wanted to lie, to say it was fine. But he just said, "We did a lot of math." She didn't press. He went to his room, closed the door, and opened his notebook. Reworked the problem, step by step. Then he stared at the blank page underneath. All he wanted was to be seen for his mind, not his skin, not his age, not his place in a system that had already decided what lanes he was allowed in. In the darkness, a message pinged his school inbox. It was from Mr. Anders, no subject line. It read, "See me tomorrow after class." Cameron's hand hovered over the keyboard, unsure whether this was an opportunity or another trap. The next morning came with a dull ache in Cameron's chest, like he was bracing for a collision. He'd barely slept, mind racing with formulas, suspicions, and the quiet calculation of motives. The email from Mr. Anders still lingered like a riddle he didn't want to solve. He walked into room 241, with his head held high, but his heart felt low. Students were already seated. This time they didn't even whisper, just stared. Their silence was heavier than their judgment. Mr. Anders stood at the front of the room, not acknowledging Cameron as he entered. The bell rang. Class began. Not a word was said about the previous day. Not about the equation. Not about Cameron's answer. The problem he had solved, the one the class hadn't even touched yet, was gone. Erased like it had never existed. Mr. Anders taught a simpler topic that day, one suited for the curriculum schedule. But Cameron noticed something else. Mr. Anders never once called on him. Even when students hesitated with answers. Even when hands remained down. Cameron raised his hand twice. It stayed in the air, unnoticed. After class he stayed behind as requested. The room cleared out slowly, a few students throwing curious glances as they exited. Cameron approached the desk. Mr. Anders didn't look up immediately. He shuffled papers, deliberate and slow, before finally lifting his eyes. "That was a clever method you used yesterday. Not conventional, but clever." Cameron waited. "Though, just a word of advice. Sometimes it's better to stick with standard approaches, simpler for everyone to follow." There it was, a compliment buried in a correction. A warning disguised as guidance. Cameron nodded slowly. "I just used what made sense to me." Mr. Anders offered a thin smile. "Just be careful not to get ahead of the class, or yourself." The conversation ended. Outside the door, Cameron leaned against the wall. The coldness wasn't accidental. It was calculated, strategic. He walked the halls as though wrapped in glass. People looked through him, not at him. Whispers returned, muted, but sharp. There's no way he figured that out on his own. Maybe he cheated. Or memorized it. He's just trying to prove something. By the time the final bell rang, Cameron felt hollowed out. Not because of a single insult, but the accumulation, the disbelief, the way excellence was treated like intrusion. He walked home that day with his hoodie up, earbuds in, but no music playing. Just silence, and the rhythm of footsteps on pavement. When he got home, he dropped his bag by the door and went to his room. He didn't eat, didn't turn on the light. He sat on the floor with his knees pulled to his chest, and stared at the equation still fresh in his memory. Not because it was difficult, but because it was the last thing he'd been allowed to be proud of. His phone buzzed. A classmate had texted anonymously, "Heard Mr. Anders called the counselor today. Something about placement reviews." Cameron's stomach dropped. That night, Cameron stood outside his mom's bedroom door, trying to decide whether to tell her, unaware that Mr. Anders was already on a call with the school counselor. Second period had barely started when the intercom cracked through the silence in Cameron's English class. "Cameron Riley, please report to the guidance office." His classmates turned their heads as he packed his bag quietly, trying not to show the worry rising in his chest. The walk through the halls felt different this time, less like walking through school, more like heading into judgment. When he arrived at the guidance office, Miss Jeffries greeted him with a small, clipped smile. She was already seated at her desk, and beside her, arms folded and face unreadable, sat Mr. Anders. "Have a seat, Cameron," she said, motioning to the chair across from them. He sat, backpack still on his shoulder. "We just wanted to have a quick chat." she began in her practiced soothing tone. Nothing to worry about. But Cameron could feel it. The shift. The setup. Mr. Anders spoke next, his tone flat. We want to revisit your placement in honors calculus. Cameron's brows knit. Why? I passed the placement tests. I've done all the work. We're not disputing that, Miss Jeffries interjected quickly. But we've observed some concerns. Concerns? Your emotional well-being. The pace of the class. The social dynamics. You're younger than everyone else, Cameron. Much younger. And these advanced classes can be isolating. He understood what they were doing. It wasn't about grades or ability. It was about perception. About control. But I haven't had any issues. I mean, yeah, people don't talk to me. But I haven't failed anything. I solved the problem Mr. Anders put on the board. Mr. Anders leaned forward, finally breaking the silence that had stretched since he'd entered. It was a good attempt. But you used an unconventional method. It suggests that you may be approaching problems in ways that aren't aligned with how the material is being taught. That can lead to confusion down the line. Cameron blinked. So, solving a problem differently is a problem now? Miss Jeffries sighed. Cameron, sometimes it's not about being right. It's about being in the right environment. We're thinking long-term. College readiness. Emotional maturity. Every word felt dipped in syrup, sweetened, but heavy. What they really meant was, you don't fit. He sat up straighter, voice firmer now.
So, what's this really about? Me being younger? Me being the only black kid in the class?
They froze. Miss Jeffries recovered first. That has nothing to do with this. But Cameron saw it. A flicker in Mr. Anders' eye. A slight flush in his neck. We just think, she continued, that Algebra 2 honors might be a better fit. Just for now. It felt like a script. Like a trap that had been set days ago. Is this a decision, Cameron asked? Or a discussion? She hesitated. We've spoken to administration. And we've already informed your mother. Cameron's mouth went dry. They had gone around him. Decided for him. He stood up slowly. Then why am I even here? Miss Jeffries offered another tight smile. Because we wanted to explain it to you face to face. As if that were a kindness. Cameron left the office in silence, feeling more erased than informed. As he walked back to class, he passed Mr. Anders heading in the opposite direction. Their eyes met for a second. Anders didn't blink. Back in his seat, Cameron could barely focus. The words on the board blurred. His notes were scattered. For the first time, he wondered if they had a point. If maybe he didn't belong here. But then he remembered something. He had solved that problem. Perfectly. On his own. With logic, creativity, and clarity. This wasn't about performance. It was about permission. Again, when the final bell rang, he didn't go straight home. Instead, he sat under the large oak tree behind the gym, the one place no one bothered him. He took out his notebook and stared at the same equation again. Then he flipped to a blank page, began sketching out his own problems. Harder ones. Ones that made him think. His fingers moved fast, as if trying to outrun the doubt. The wind shifted slightly. He felt like someone was watching. He turned. A girl stood a few feet away. Same calculus class. Long brown hair. Quiet. Cameron barely remembered her name. Hey, she said. Hey. What they did in there. It wasn't right. He didn't respond. You solved it better than I could. Better than half the class. Still, Cameron said nothing. But her words stayed with him. He packed his bag. When he got home, his mom was waiting in the living room. Dana Riley stood, arms crossed, phone still in her hand, and a fire in her eyes. Cameron hadn't seen before. Dana Riley had been through long shifts, hospital floors flooded with trauma, and endless nights juggling schedules and single motherhood. But nothing lit a fire in her like hearing that her son had been pulled from a class he earned his way into without her consent. Cameron stood in the doorway of their apartment as she paced the living room, still holding the phone that had delivered the news. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were volcanic. They said it was for your well-being, for your development. Dana scoffed. Since when do they care about any of that without calling me first? Cameron dropped his bag quietly. Unsure whether to speak. They said you already knew. No, they told me. After it was decided. That's not knowing. That's not being part of the decision. That's being handed a script and expected to smile. She grabbed her car keys from the hook by the door. Cameron barely had time to ask before she said it. We're going to the school. Right now. The drive was tight with silence. Cameron watched his mother's knuckles tighten around the steering wheel. Not with rage, but restraint. She wasn't going to be the angry black mom they expected. She was going to be the dangerous one. The calm, calculating woman who knew the power of her words and how to wield them. When they walked into the front office, the secretary looked up with the forced smile of someone trained to de-escalate. "How can I help you?" "Dana Riley. I need to speak to Miss Jeffries and Mr. Anders." Now. Within minutes they were seated in a smaller office than Cameron had visited earlier. Miss Jeffries entered first, flanked moments later by Mr. Anders, who looked startled but not surprised. "Miss Riley," the counselor began, "we understand this is upsetting." Dana cut her off with a raised hand. "What exactly are you basing this placement change on?" "As we mentioned, it's about social cohesion and long-term academic pacing. Not grades? Not performance?" "Cameron is bright," Mr. Anders said flatly. "But the environment of the class, it requires a certain level of maturity." "You mean why?" They paused. Dana leaned forward. "You can dress it up however you want. Development behavior, cohesion. But the only thing Cameron's done wrong is not look like the rest of your students." Mr. Anders shifted in his seat. "That's an unfair assumption. What's unfair is having my child targeted. Challenged on his first day like he's some intruder. Solving a problem you knew most of your students couldn't. And then instead of praising him, you erase the board. You bury his success." Miss Jeffries tried to intervene, but Dana wasn't finished. "And then you hold a meeting about his future without him. Without me, and you lie to his face by calling it a conversation. That's not education. That's containment." Silence blanketed the room. Dana stood. "You are not removing my son from that class. You're going to put him right back in the seat he earned, and you will not isolate or punish him for your discomfort." Mr. Anders looked at Miss Jeffries, then down at the table. The kind of silence that means, "We didn't expect this." Dana placed a folder on the table. Test scores, letters, his placement documentation. "And if this isn't reversed by tomorrow, I'll be contacting the district. And if they fail, I'll contact the press. Do not test me." They didn't argue, just nodded. Thinly. The meeting ended. Cameron followed her out the door, mind reeling. In the parking lot, he finally exhaled. "Thanks, Mom." She looked over at him. "Baby, you did the work. All I did was make sure they didn't erase it." That night, Cameron sat down at his desk. For the first time in days, he studied without fear, but as he worked through his equations, something else pinged in the back of his mind. Reputation, backlash, retaliation. The next morning he walked into room 21. His seat was still there, but the air was different, colder, tighter. Mr. Anders didn't look at him. No one did. As the bell rang, Cameron noticed a student behind him slide their phone under the desk and hit record. Dana didn't sleep the night after the meeting. Her hands shook, her mind ran laps, and when the sun rose over Jefferson High she was already dressed in slacks and a blazer, hair pulled back tight. At 9:03 a.m., she walked into the district office holding a manila folder labeled, "Formal Academic Discrimination Complaint, Cameron Riley." The receptionist raised an eyebrow when she asked to speak directly with the director of curriculum. "Do you have an appointment?" Dana set the folder down. "No, but I have documentation. Emails, assignments, graded quizzes, audio from meetings, and legal counsel on standby." An hour later, her complaint was filed. By noon, she'd called an education advocacy group from Richmond, one that focused on equity and gifted programs. They'd heard of this before. "You're not the first to say this," the director told her. That same afternoon, Dana emailed an old friend, Melanie Torres, a local reporter who worked at the Virginia Ledger, a modest but credible regional newspaper. She'd covered school board controversies before. Melanie replied in less than 20 minutes. "Let's talk. This smells like something bigger." Meanwhile, Cameron returned to class. He walked into honors calculus like a soldier re-entering a battlefield. No one spoke. No one looked up. Mr. Anders didn't greet him. For the entire period, Cameron's name was never called. Not once. He sat there, hand raised 3 times, ignored each time. At the end of class, Mr. Anders finally made eye contact. "Cameron," he said flatly, "take this." A paper slid across the desk. Quiz results. Cameron's breath hitched. A red B circled at the top. He scanned the answers. All correct. Every formula, every derivative, every integral step. He flipped the page. On the last problem, An advanced limit function was a note in red ink. Too many steps. Concise answers expected at this level. His jaw clenched. He'd shown his work. In detail, just like every textbook instructed. Just like they told black students to do, to be twice as good, twice as thorough, to leave no room for doubt. He looked at the rubric printed at the top of the sheet. No mention of concise answers. No penalty for too many steps. That night, Cameron sat at the kitchen table, reworking the quiz. He followed the rubric line by line. Each criterion, each section, every deduction Mr. Anders made was subjective. Dana sat across from him. They're trying to wear you down. I know. We're not going to let them. She submitted the regraded quiz to the advocacy group. Melanie, the reporter, began interviewing other students and parents. What she uncovered was quiet, but telling. Black and brown students had long described feeling watched in AP classes. Some had dropped out. Others had been told off record they might thrive more elsewhere. A draft article took shape. By the end of the week, Dana received a call from the district's legal office. We're reviewing the complaint and will schedule a meeting with the parties involved. It was the start of something, but only the start. Cameron double-checks the grading rubric and realizes Mr. Anders deducted points for showing too many steps. The email came at 2:14 a.m. Dana was asleep, her phone charging on the nightstand, but when she checked it just before her morning shift, the subject line caught her breath. Full video day 1. No message, no name, just a Google Drive link in a string of letters. She hesitated for half a second before clicking. The screen loaded slowly. Then it played. Room 241. The grainy black and white footage showed Cameron walking into class. The first one in the room. Quiet. Still. Then Mr. Anders entered. Dana fast-forward. She watched as he wrote the problem on the board. Watched her son step up, solve it. No disruption. No defiance. Just calm logic. Then the moment. Cameron finished. Mr. Anders erased the board. The class remained silent. It was all there. Dana sent the footage to the blog editor who had posted the original article. This time, the story exploded. By noon, the new headline was everywhere. Black genius gets marked down for being too smart. The screenshot of Cameron's answer next to his downgraded grade, side by side with the video footage, spread like wildfire. Twitter timelines became battlegrounds. Threads popped up dissecting every frame. Let him learn trended by 3 p.m. Celebrities chimed in. A famous talk show host tweeted, "A 14-year-old black kid gets punished for being brilliant. That's the real math problem." Her post alone hit 1.2 million likes. Cameron, sitting at home, watched his phone vibrate non-stop. Interview requests, support messages, hate mail. It was all coming at once. Students from nearby schools created signs. "We stand with Cameron. Black brilliance matters." A TikTok video compared Cameron's solution to the textbook one, and concluded his method was objectively cleaner. It reached 4.6 million views in 48 hours. Meanwhile, Mr. Anders said nothing. When reached for comment, the district issued a vague press statement. "We are aware of recent public discourse and are committed to equity, inclusion and ongoing review of academic procedures." But people weren't buying it. Comment sections overflowed. If that kid were white, he'd be called a prodigy. They didn't just try to fail him, they tried to erase him. Cameron's classmates began to shift uncomfortably. Some tried to play neutral, others whispered apologies. A few doubled down, posting anonymous rants on student forums, claiming Cameron was trying to be the main character. At school, Cameron walked through the halls like a ghost carrying a spotlight. Everyone saw him, but no one knew what to say. One morning, he found a sticky note on his locker. "Keep your head up. No name, no signature." That same day, Mr. Anders didn't show up to class. A substitute teacher handed out worksheets. Later, a leaked email surfaced, allegedly from Mr. Anders to school leadership, arguing that the public misrepresentation of classroom dynamics was damaging his reputation. He claimed Cameron was increasingly disruptive, non-compliant, and performing for attention. But the video showed otherwise. Then came the twist. The school released their own version of the security footage. It was a 37-second clip. It showed Cameron entering the classroom, sitting down. And that was it. Everything else? Gone. Outrage grew again. Why release an edited video when the full one exists? Users demanded. Side-by-side comparisons appeared online. The timestamp gaps were obvious. People accused the school of deliberate tampering. Petitions circulated demanding Mr. Anders' termination. One popular tweet read, "Imagine trying to edit out a child's intelligence because it doesn't fit your bias. That's the scandal." Cameron stayed mostly quiet. Not because he didn't have words, but because every time he spoke, someone tried to twist it. He wrote in his journal that night, "They don't care if you're right. They care if you're easy." Dana, meanwhile, began meeting with an education attorney, not to sue yet, but to understand their rights. The lawyer reviewed the case, raised an eyebrow at the footage and said, "This isn't just a complaint, it's a pattern." The lawyer requested copies of all classroom video archives for the past 90 days. The school stalled. Cameron, though overwhelmed, began to recognize the power of visibility. His name wasn't a footnote anymore. It was a headline. But he also knew fame wasn't the same as safety. 3 nights later, a USB drive was slipped under Dana's front door, labeled original security footage. The USB drive left under Dana's door sat on the kitchen table like a ticking bomb. It was unmarked aside from the words, "original security footage," written in blocky black ink. Dana didn't plug it in right away. She waited until Cameron was asleep, poured herself a glass of water, and braced herself. The footage confirmed everything. Not just what Cameron had said, but what the school had tried to hide. More importantly, it included audio, a rare configuration for a classroom camera. Dana clicked through the timeline, and there it was, the first day. Cameron walking in, Mr. Anders staring, then smirking. His voice was low but audible. "You're in the wrong class, unless you're some kind of genius." Dana's fists clenched. Then the challenge. Then Cameron solving the problem. Mr. Anders erasing the board with a dismissive shrug. Dana watched the faces of the other students. Some amused, some stunned, none supportive. But the most shocking part came after the class ended. When Cameron left, Mr. Anders turned to another student, leaned in, and said, "He won't last 2 weeks." Dana closed the laptop. But while she debated the next step, someone else acted first. A student named Lucy Tran, a quiet junior who sat in the second row, posted her own footage to TikTok. She'd recorded the first day too on her phone. She'd been hesitant to say anything, but the school's edited video pushed her too far. Her caption read, "Since the school won't tell the truth, here's what really happened to Cameron." The video captured the entire moment. The board, the challenge, Cameron's calm focus, the cold dismissal. It spread like fire. Within 24 hours, the video hit 5 million views. Lucy's TikTok account blew up overnight. News outlets reached out. She refused interviews, saying, "This isn't about me. This is about what was done to him." But her impact was irreversible. Media coverage expanded. National networks ran the story. Hashtags exploded. "Support Cameron," "Expose Anders," "Black Excellence." The school could no longer stay quiet. The next day, a formal announcement was sent district-wide. Mr. Anders had been placed on temporary administrative leave pending investigation. Students cheered. Teachers whispered. Cameron felt numb. He wasn't sure if it was relief or anxiety. Things moved too fast now to make sense of emotion. In calculus class, the substitute teacher stumbled through the material. Cameron sat in silence, acutely aware that every movement he made was being watched. But the fallout was just beginning. 3 days later, the teachers' union released a statement. "Mr. Anders is a respected educator of 27 years. We believe the rush to judgment has been fueled by social media distortions. We are filing a counterclaim, alleging that Mr. Anders has been the victim of targeted harassment and defamation." The union's attorney went on a local news channel saying, "This teacher has dedicated his life to education. He was simply maintaining academic standards. We must be careful not to punish rigor." That word, rigor, cut through everything. Supporters of Mr. Anders began to surface. Online forums filled with coded language. "We can't let woke politics ruin education. Kids today can't take discipline." Dana received a voicemail from a blocked number. "Hope your boy enjoys the spotlight. It won't last." Cameron's social media filled with both praise and poison. Some called him a hero. Others accused him of playing the race card. One comment read, "You people always think you're being oppressed." He tried to ignore it, but it was everywhere. The weight of being a symbol was growing heavier than being a student. In school, things got more complicated. Some teachers treated him like glass too fragile to touch. Others avoided him entirely. Students who once ignored him now wanted selfies. He was no longer invisible, but hypervisible. A living headline. That night, Dana called the lawyer again. They're going to try and bury us under paperwork and press cycles, she said. I want to push back. The attorney advised patience. Let them escalate. We'll use their own words against them. Cameron lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening through the walls as his mom argued legal strategy. He wanted to go back to when it was just about the math. Then the next day, Lucy Tran approached him before class. Hey, she said. There's more. He looked at her, puzzled. I've been recording every class since that first day. Not for drama, just because I felt something was off. She handed him a thumb drive. You should see what he said about you when you weren't in the room. It came 2 days after Lucy Tran handed over the thumb drive. Mr. Anders filed a formal counter-complaint with the school district and teachers' union, claiming that Cameron had created a hostile learning environment. The complaint, written with legal precision, accused Cameron of being arrogant, disruptive, and having a defiant demeanor that made Mr. Anders feel unsafe. He stated that Cameron's presence had undermined his authority in the classroom, causing undue stress and impairing his ability to teach. The timing wasn't a coincidence. It was a counterstrike. Dana read the report with shaking hands. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. They were flipping the narrative, casting a child as a threat, as the aggressor. This is what they do, said her lawyer grimly. When the truth gets too loud, they shift the spotlight, make the victim the villain. The union backed Mr. Anders' claim publicly. A spokesperson gave a press conference stating, "We stand behind our educators. No teacher should feel unsafe in their classroom." Suddenly, it wasn't about the footage, or the grading, or the erasure. It was about feelings. Anders' discomfort, his fragility. Right-wing media jumped on the story like wolves. Headlines blared. Teacher punished for upholding standards. Woke mob targets veteran educator over tone. 14-year-old student weaponizes race against teacher. Cable networks ran endless panels. Talking heads debated the implications of coddling students. One host said, "This is what happens when we let kids think they're above discipline." Cameron's face was everywhere. Not as a student, but a symbol. A flashpoint in the culture war. Dana was doxxed. Her address leaked. Threatening messages arrived in the mail. And by phone, one postcard read, "Your little math genius is about to flunk real life." Cameron stopped eating. He barely spoke. His phone buzzed nonstop, so he turned it off. Then he stopped coming out of his room. His once perfect attendance dropped. He missed 2 days in a row. Dana sat outside his bedroom, sliding plates of food under the door, whispering encouragements that landed like prayers. She felt powerless and enraged. This wasn't justice, it was backlash, designed to break them. But inside that silence, something changed in Cameron. He began rereading everything. The articles, the complaint, the old emails. He printed Mr. Anders' original challenge from day one and taped it above his desk. Below it he wrote in black marker, "This is not where it ends." Dana noticed the shift. One night she found him at his desk at 2 a.m., reworking math problems. He looked up. "I'm not letting him take this from me." He returned to school the next day. Heads turned. Phones rose. But he walked straight to room. Mr. Anders was still on leave. But the substitute looked startled when he entered. "Didn't think you'd come back so soon," she said. "I never left," Cameron replied. "They just tried to write me out." That same week, the school board announced a public hearing to address the controversy. They tried to keep it quiet, but word spread fast. Parents, students, and reporters packed the auditorium. Lines formed down the hallway. The board looked nervous. Cameras flashed. Protesters held signs outside. "Black kids deserve classrooms too." And smart nasal threat. Inside, public comments began. Some spoke in defense of Mr. Anders. "He's a good man. He taught both my kids. This is a witch hunt." Others rose to defend Cameron. "Our children are watching. When brilliance is punished, we all lose." Then came the twist. A student from Cameron's class, one who had never spoken up, took the mic. She was quiet at first, holding a crumpled piece of paper. "I didn't want to say anything because I didn't think it would matter," she began. "But Mr. Anders told us, before Cameron even walked in, that freshmen don't last in my class. He said he'd break them in or break them down." The room froze. She continued. And when Cameron solved that equation, he looked mad, not surprised mad, like he lost. Gasps. Then silence. Dana closed her eyes. She had been waiting for someone else to say it out loud. The hearing adjourned without resolution. The board said they'd deliberate privately, but the division had been laid bare. That night, someone spray-painted the front of Cameron's school. "Defend our teachers." The auditorium lights buzzed low, the air thick with anticipation and unease. Folding chairs lined the aisles, filled with faces that held everything from compassion to contempt. Banners hung outside the school, read "Protect our teachers" and "Education, not accusation." But just as many bore the words, "Let him learn," "Accountability now," and "Justice for Cameron." News vans idled outside. Microphones stood at every corner. Local, regional, and even national reporters packed the press rows. No one expected a small-town school board meeting to become ground zero in a national conversation about race, education, and power. But here they were. Dana sat in the front row, her eyes scanning the crowd. Cameron sat beside her, shoulders squared, chin slightly lowered. He wore a simple white dress shirt and navy pants. No tie. He didn't want to look like he was performing, just like he belonged. Half the crowd cheered for Mr. Anders, many wearing school spirit shirts, waving hand-drawn signs that read, "We stand with our teachers." The other half was just as loud. Students and parents of color, educators, allies, their signs shouted, "Black kids matter," "Support black students," and "Excellence shouldn't be punished." The board chair called the meeting to order. Her voice cracked through the mic, almost swallowed by the hum of cameras and restless chairs. After procedural motions, the board opened the floor to public comment. The first speakers trickled up one by one. A middle-aged white father spoke about how Mr. Anders helped his daughter get into college. "He's a traditionalist. He's hard, yes, but fair." A black mother followed, voice calm but shaking. "My son dropped that class last year. He said Mr. Anders always made him feel small. I didn't speak up then. I wish I had." Another student. Then a retired teacher. Testimonies layered atop each other like bricks. Then the board chair paused. "Next up, Cameron Riley has requested to speak." Gasps. Camera shutters clicked. Dana's hand reached out instinctively, brushing Cameron's knee. Cameron stood. He walked slowly up the center aisle, each step echoing through the tight acoustics. He looked down at the small paper he'd folded and unfolded 100 times. The mic adjusted to his height with a squeak. "My name is Cameron Riley. I'm 14. I like math. That's why I took the class. Not to be better than anyone. Not to cause problems." His voice wavered for a second, then steadied. "I didn't come here to threaten anyone. I came here to learn." Silence. I was challenged. I responded, and instead of being welcomed, I was erased. Then punished. Then accused. And now I'm standing here having to explain why I belong in a classroom I tested into. He looked up.
I didn't ask for the spotlight. I just wanted space.
A slow, swelling round of applause began. First a few hands, then more. The board chair tapped the mic, urging silence, but it rolled on like a wave. Dana wiped her eyes. Then, unexpectedly, someone else stood up. A student. A white boy from Cameron's calculus class. His name was Reed Mallory, quarterback, honor roll, student government. A face the school liked to show off. He walked to the mic. People murmured. Reed didn't read from a paper. He looked directly at the board. "I've been in that class for 2 years. I've never seen anyone solve what Cameron solved on day 1. I remember thinking, man, that's some next-level stuff. And I also remember Mr. Anders not saying a word, just erasing it, like it didn't happen." More murmurs. Reed continued. "At first I didn't say anything because it didn't affect me. But then I watched how everyone treated him. I watched how we all stayed quiet. And that's on us." He took a breath. "I don't think Mr. Anders is evil, but he was wrong. And the way this whole thing got flipped, that's worse. Cameron didn't do anything but show up and be smart. If that makes a teacher uncomfortable, maybe we should ask why." Dead silence. Then a burst of applause. Stronger, louder. Reed stepped down. Cameron looked at him as he passed. Reed gave a small nod. The hearing stretched on for 2 more hours. Statements. Accusations. Apologies. Silence. By the end, no vote was taken. The board said they'd review the testimonies and release a statement within the week. But it didn't matter. The room had shifted. The truth had finally been spoken. Not just by Cameron, but by someone who had everything to lose by telling it. The next morning, Cameron found his locker covered in sticky notes. Some supportive and one that simply read, "Lie." The meeting had ended, but its aftershocks trembled through the school like an unspoken warning. Students whispered, teachers avoided eye contact, and board members held frantic side meetings behind closed doors. Everyone knew something had shifted, but no one knew what came next. Until the confession. 2 days after the town hall, the local paper ran a front-page story. The headline, "Student Claims Teacher Predicted Black Freshman Would Break Down." Reed Mallory, the same student who had spoken up at the hearing, had given a written statement to the board, and someone had leaked it. In it, Reed wrote, "On the first day of class, before Cameron walked in, Mr. Anders told a few of us that we'd probably get a new student who won't last long. He said freshmen never do, especially ones who try to prove something. Then he laughed and said, he'll either transfer out or break down."
The school exploded.
The media jumped again. Local networks aired segments every hour. The superintendent called an emergency board meeting. This wasn't bias implied. This was bias confessed. The crowd at school picketed daily, half demanding Mr. Anders' resignation, half demanding Cameron let it go. Inside the school, Cameron tried to stay focused, but the walls seemed to watch him now. Teachers paused when he entered the room. Students who had once filmed him now looked away, some with guilt, others with quiet resentment. Dana met with the lawyer again. "He weaponized expectations," she said. "He made failure part of the design." The attorney nodded slowly. "And now it's documented." But as public outrage swelled, so did the backlash. Cameron's face was graffitied onto a bathroom stall, with the words "Crybaby Genius." His locker was pried open, nothing stolen, just scattered. Still, he didn't flinch. He kept walking, kept writing in his notebook, kept showing up. Then came the letter. It arrived in a thick white envelope, embossed with a gold seal. Dana opened the mailbox that afternoon and froze. She rushed inside and slid it across the kitchen table to Cameron. He stared. The return address, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, pre-college mathematics program. His hands trembled as he opened it. Inside was a formal letter. "Dear Cameron Riley, based on your outstanding academic performance and recent mathematical work, we are pleased to offer you a full scholarship to attend our summer mathematics discovery program." He read the paragraph 3 times. Dana hugged him tightly, both of them trembling now. For the first time in weeks, Cameron smiled. But the next day, things darkened again. He handed a copy of the letter to the school's front office to confirm his transcript submission for the program. 2 days passed. No confirmation. Dana called the admissions coordinator at MIT. They politely told her they hadn't received the documentation. Dana returned to the school in person. The secretary fumbled with files. "We sent it, I think. Maybe there was a delay. I'll check again." An hour later, a new version of the transcript was emailed to MIT. This one missing 2 semesters of math grades. Dana exploded. "You're not just trying to erase his past. You're sabotaging his future." The secretary apologized. It was an accident, but Cameron knew better. Even when you win, they change the rules. That night, MIT's director of outreach called Dana directly. And what she said left Dana in stunned silence. The phone call from MIT's director of outreach confirmed what Dana had feared. The transcript that finally arrived was incomplete, missing the necessary verification signatures in 2 crucial semesters of Cameron's math progression. "Had we not known about Cameron's story through other channels," the director said gently, "we might have assumed he dropped those courses. It could have disqualified him." Dana didn't reply right away. Her throat tightened, not with sadness but with rage. This wasn't incompetence. This was sabotage. Cameron sat at the kitchen table listening. Silent. He didn't need to be told. He already knew. "They want me boxed in," he said. "Like if I get too far, I'll mess up their blueprint." Dana's hands clenched the phone. "We're done playing nice." She hung up and dialed the district superintendent, demanding a written statement, confirming the school's error. She left voicemails with the board. She called local media outlets, and when that didn't spark movement fast enough, she called a civil rights advocacy group that had been following Cameron's story since the viral footage broke. That evening, the group released a public statement. "It is unacceptable for a school system to deny or delay academic documentation that could change a student's life trajectory. This is educational gatekeeping, rooted in racial bias." The story picked up again. Round 2. "Let Him Learn" started trending again on Twitter. MIT admissions was flooded with messages from supporters. Petitions circled. Reporters showed up at the school again. Under pressure, the school tried to frame the mishandling as a clerical oversight. But MIT didn't buy it. Neither did anyone else. Meanwhile, Cameron, caught in the middle of it all, made a decision. He started tutoring. Not for grades or reputation, but for the kids in his neighborhood who looked up to him. Kids in middle school struggling with math because no one ever told them they were allowed to be brilliant. He set up weekend sessions at the community center, called it Math in Motion. Word spread fast. Parents brought their kids from across the district. At first it was just a few, then it became a room full. Cameron printed worksheets, broke down calculus into building blocks. He used the same chalk his teacher had erased him with. And when one boy, a 7th grader named Tyrese, solved his first full equation, he smiled and said, "You remind me of me." It wasn't just healing. It was purpose. Dana watched him transform pain into power and realized something profound. Even if the system never apologized, Cameron had already rewritten the narrative. But they weren't done yet. One Thursday afternoon, a black town car pulled up outside their apartment complex. A woman in a navy suit stepped out. She rang the bell with a briefcase in hand. Dana opened the door cautiously. "Dana Riley?" "Yes. My name is Sonia Alvarez. I'm with the Education and Civil Rights Law Project. May I come in?" They sat at the kitchen table. Cameron watched from the hallway. Sonia opened a case and slid over a packet. "We've been monitoring Cameron's case, reviewing everything. The footage, the testimony, the transcript issue, the patterns. We believe what happened isn't isolated. It's systemic." Dana raised an eyebrow. "You mean there are more?" Sonia nodded. "We think Cameron's story could anchor a civil rights lawsuit. Not just against the school, but the district. Educational discrimination, paper trail manipulation, psychological harm, and more importantly, pattern of bias over years." Cameron stepped forward. "You mean they've done this before?" "Yes, but they've never been called out like this. Until now." Sonia slid over a list of names, former students, all black, who had once taken Mr. Anders' class and suddenly disappeared. The headlines came quickly after Sonia Alvarez's visit. Riley family files civil rights lawsuit against school district. News tickers scrolled the statement across national broadcasts. The complaint alleged systemic educational racism, racial targeting, academic suppression, transcript tampering, and psychological harm. The lawsuit named the school, the district, and Mr. Anders directly. Cameron sat beside his mother and Sonia at the press conference held outside the district's main office. Cameras rolled as Dana read the family's official statement. "This is not just about our son. This is about every child told they don't belong because they're too smart, too different, too black. We will not be silent. We will not be erased." The community fractured. Some praised the family for their courage. Teachers from other schools shared anonymous stories about similar patterns. Parents of former students reached out. Emails flooded in from other states. Support came from Harvard professors, engineers, and former gifted program students who had faced similar walls. But others called it a witch hunt. The school board tried to shift focus. They issued a carefully worded statement. "We acknowledge concerns brought forth and are committed to equity in education. While we cannot comment on ongoing litigation, we are reviewing internal policies." Meanwhile, Mr. Anders announced his early retirement for personal reasons. But the timing fooled no one. The media ran with the headline, "Veteran teacher retires amidst lawsuit alleging racial bias." A new substitute was installed. Cameras captured Mr. Anders leaving the building with a cardboard box in his hands. Cameron didn't smile. He didn't cheer. Because it wasn't victory, it was escape. His name had become part of a larger conversation now. Talk shows debated what his case meant for education. Black student forums organized webinars around Cameron's law, a growing movement advocating for transparency in academic tracking and grading policies. But with national attention came national scrutiny. The Riley home received more hate mail. Some letters were postmarked from other states. One read, "You're making a mountain out of a math problem." Cameron kept tutoring. Math in Motion grew bigger. The community center had to move the sessions to a church basement to fit the growing number of students. Then 6 weeks after the filing, a court date was announced. May 4th. It would be open to the public. Jury trial. The district scrambled. They hired a high-powered legal team. PR consultants. They released a video campaign highlighting diversity in education, featuring carefully curated interviews with students and teachers. Dana wasn't impressed. "They're selling optics. We're bringing facts." Sonia worked around the clock building the case. She subpoenaed old grading data, teacher evaluation records, and past parent complaints. Then one night Sonia called Dana from her office. "You're not going to believe this," she said. "We have a surprise witness." Dana sat upright. "Who?" "A former student. Her name's Alicia Boyd. She's 29 now. Said she took Mr. Anders' class back in 20. And she has a story, one that sounds almost identical to Cameron's." Dana exhaled. "Send me everything." That night, Cameron sat quietly at the table, going through flashcards he had made for Tyrese, his youngest 2T. Dana sat beside him, slid a printed email across the table. He read the first lines. "Mr. Anders told me I didn't have the right mind for calculus. He said I was too creative. I left the class by October. I never touched advanced math again." He looked up. "This happened before." Dana nodded. "And she's willing to testify." The next morning, a thick manila envelope appeared in their mailbox. Inside, an anonymous collection of Mr. Anders' past student evaluations, some with red flags, and one marked confidential. Alicia Boyd sat at her kitchen table with the webcam on, testifying via deposition from hundreds of miles away. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled. "I was in Mr. Anders' class back in 2010. I remember the first day he didn't say anything to me, just looked. By the third week, he'd started calling on me only when he knew I'd struggle. He once told me in front of the class that creativity was the enemy of structure, that I needed to stop thinking like a poet." She paused, gathering breath. "I was the only black girl in the class. I left after 6 weeks. I dropped out of the honors track altogether. I never took calculus again." Her story landed like a thunderclap. Sonia Alvarez leaned into the mic. "And has anyone from the school ever contacted you about that experience?" The deposition transcript was filed into the case. It didn't stand alone for long. Following the public filing of the lawsuit, more former students came forward. One by one, emails trickled into Sonia's inbox. Some were anonymous, others signed with full names. A quiet pattern emerged. Different years, same outcome. Black students placed into Mr. Anders' AP or honors courses. Brief windows of hope, then humiliation, then transfer. Some were told they weren't a good fit. Others were failed on technicalities. Many just stopped showing up. The common thread: silence. No one had spoken up before because they didn't think they could win. The advocacy group compiled the data. Sonia's legal team created timelines, patterns, heat maps, a statistical breakdown of enrollment, retention, and drop rates for students of color in the district's upper-level STEM courses. When the school district saw the breadth of the evidence, they panicked. A new offer arrived: confidential settlement, mid-6 figures, private apology, public statement of regret, but no admission of wrongdoing. Dana sat in the lawyer's office holding the offer in her hands. "It's tempting," Sonia admitted. "It's real money. Security." Dana folded the paper slowly. "They can keep their check. We're not selling the truth." Cameron nodded. "We didn't get this far to stop at the edge, so they said no." And the district braced for trial. The media caught wind of the rejected settlement. The news cycle roared again. Now it wasn't just about Cameron. It was about history, about silence, about erasure. Sonia scheduled final depositions. Melanie's article dropped another bombshell. A teacher at a neighboring school admitted anonymously that Mr. Anders had a reputation. "He always believed in rigor," she said, "but only for some kids. He thought others needed simpler structures." That's a quote. In back rooms, some of his peers had questioned his tactics, but none had reported him. It's just how he taught. But Cameron's trial would now become a reckoning. On the eve of the court date, Sonia reviewed the witness list. Alicia would testify, so would 2 other former students. One had become a nurse, another had dropped out of college altogether. Their stories varied in detail, but echoed the same core harm. Someone told them early on that brilliance wasn't for them. Cameron sat at the kitchen table again, reviewing his notes. His hands no longer trembled when he looked at equations, but his heart beat hard when he thought about speaking. Dana placed her hand on his. "You're ready." He nodded. The courtroom was packed. A line wrapped around the block. Journalists, parents, former students, even students from other districts sat in the gallery. The district tried to keep cameras out. The judge allowed a single pool feed. Opening statements were made. Dana watched the jurors closely. She saw the way their eyebrows raised during Alicia's testimony. The way they leaned forward when Sonia showed a chart comparing grading across racial lines. But the moment everyone waited for came the next day. The judge called the next witness, Cameron Riley. He stood, spine straight. As he approached the stand, Cameron locked eyes with Mr. Anders, and for the first time, Mr. Anders looked away. Cameron stood with measured grace. As he took the witness stand, he looked smaller than the other witnesses had in that high-backed chair, but he carried something heavier. His name, his truth, his future. The courtroom held its breath. Sonia approached slowly, her voice calm but precise. Cameron, how did you feel walking into Mr. Anders' class on the first day? He paused, hopeful, nervous, but ready. And when he challenged you with that advanced problem, I thought he was testing me like a rite of passage. I thought if I solved it, I'd be accepted. Were you? Cameron looked down. No, she continued. What happened instead? He erased the board. Like I hadn't done anything. Like I didn't matter. Did you ever feel welcome in that classroom? No. I felt like I was being watched. Like I was being set up to fail. Sonia nodded and paused. And despite all of that, you continued to succeed. How? Because I knew what I was capable of. Because I worked hard. And because I wasn't going to let anyone define my limits but me. Murmurs rippled through the gallery. The judge asked for silence. Then came the question everyone had been waiting for. Sonia turned toward him. If Mr. Anders were sitting in this courtroom today, which he is, and you had one thing to say to him, what would it be? Cameron glanced across the room. Mr. Anders sat stone-faced behind the defense table. The boy's voice didn't waver. I'd thank him. The courtroom stiffened. I'd thank him, Cameron repeated, for showing me exactly what I'm up against. Not just him, but the whole system that thinks kids like me don't belong in certain rooms. He made it clear, and now I know what to fight, and who to fight for. Silence. A silence so dense it seemed to press against the walls. One juror wiped away a tear. Sonia smiled softly. No further questions. The defense declined to cross-examine. The trial concluded. The next day, after closing arguments, the jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, the courtroom rose. The verdict was unanimous, in favor of the Rileys. The judge awarded compensatory damages, punitive damages, and mandated a complete overhaul of the district's academic placement and grading policies. A third-party audit would oversee equity training and new transparency protocols for tracking student progress. Outside the courthouse, cameras snapped. Dana stood with one hand on her son's shoulder, the other gripping the hand of Sonia Alvarez. This isn't the end, Dana told the press. It's the beginning of accountability. Cameron didn't smile for the photos. He wasn't there for applause. He looked straight into the cameras and said, let the next kid walk into that room knowing it was built for them too. The footage went viral within hours. That night, as the house finally settled, Dana and Cameron sat in silence on the couch, holding warm mugs of tea. A knock came at the door. Cameron opened it. A courier stood holding a thick envelope. No words, just a nod. Cameron took it. In the top left corner, stamped in gold, the MIT logo. Cameron slid the envelope open, and his breath caught when he saw the word admitted. Cameron stood in the hallway, with the MIT envelope trembling in his hands. Dana hovered behind him, heart pounding as if the paper itself could change their lives. He peeled back the flap with nervous fingers. Inside, a crisp letter, printed on thick, cream-colored paper. Dear Cameron Riley, it is our distinct honor to offer you early admission to the undergraduate program at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, with a full 4-year scholarship under our Equity and STEM initiative. His hands dropped. His knees bent. His breath hitched. Dana grabbed him, arms tight around his shoulders. Oh my God, she whispered. You did it, baby. No, he whispered back, eyes brimming. We did it. Tears didn't fall all at once. They came like quiet waves, the kind that had been waiting too long to be released. They called Sonia. They called Lucy Tran. They called Alicia Boyd. They called Tyrese's mom. They called the community center. Every person who had touched Cameron's journey got the news first. The following months blurred into celebration and packing. MIT sent a welcome package. Campus maps. Orientation materials. Dana bought him his first real suitcase. Cameron didn't ask for new clothes or gadgets. Just notebooks, chalk, and a small framed photo of him and his mom, at the courthouse. By August, he was standing beneath the great dome of MIT. His dorm was on the 3rd floor. Simple, clean, a desk, a bed, A shelf. He unpacked slowly, placing each item with intention. Then, from the inside pocket of his jacket, he pulled out one last item. A tiny piece of white chalk. The same one from that first day in Mr. Anders' classroom. The one he'd pocketed before leaving the school for the last time. He placed it on the shelf, beside a handwritten note. Proof that brilliance can't be erased. His roommate, a lanky engineering major from Seattle, raised an eyebrow. What's that? Cameron smiled. A reminder. Classes started. Lectures flooded in. Cameron met professors who looked him in the eye, challenged him, but never doubted his right to be there. For the first time in his academic life, he didn't feel like he was on trial. He thrived. Not because the work was easy, but because he finally had permission to love it out loud. At night he still tutored virtually. Math in Motion. Now had students from 5 states. He built a website. He wrote articles. He became a mentor to dozens of young black students navigating advanced placement systems across the country. He was no longer a symbol of controversy. He was a symbol of persistence. Dana visited him twice that semester. Once in October, and once during finals. Each time, she found him taller, quieter, sharper. You look like you belong here, she said the second time. Cameron looked up from his laptop. I always did. That winter, he gave a talk at a national education summit. The title, Redefining Rigor, Why We Must Stop Policing Black Brilliance. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. And back in Virginia, outside Jefferson High, someone had taped a photocopy of his MIT acceptance letter on the front door. No signature, just 3 words handwritten at the bottom. He belonged here. How many other black kids were told they didn't belong before they ever had a chance to prove they did? How many more brilliant black kids are being pushed out before they even get a chance to prove themselves? If this story made you feel something, don't let it end here. Type yes if you believe in justice. Subscribe if this broke your heart.